Welcome everyone. We expect people to kind of trickle in as we go, so we'll get started and understand that we'll have potentially some repeat questions. That's okay. We had that last time too. I want to start by saying welcome, and we're really excited to have you all here. I'm Kira Silk. I'm the director of the Grand Challenges for Social Work, and I'll soon kick it over to Rick Barth, who is the chair of our leadership board. But we are really excited to be able to offer this program for this year and the following year. For now, we are hoping to continue to receive funds that would allow us to continue the program, but we're really excited to be able to launch this doctoral program for the next 2 years. So with that, we'll let Rick introduce himself and we'll kick it off for questions soon.
Thanks, Kira. So yes, welcome everyone. It's exciting to see your interest. I finally remember my years as a PhD student and scrambling around trying to get money to do my dream study, which of course the dissertation never can be, but you can get as close as possible if you have more support. So that's what we're excited to be offering. This opportunity comes up. The Grand Challenges has been was conceptualized really gradually from 2012, announced in 2016. Most of our funding has been from the deans of your schools, almost all of it. So this is the first time where we really got any outside funding from the New York Community Trust, which has a long history, or one of its sub-foundations has a long history of funding doctoral education, the Fosbeck Foundation in New York City. And they haven't been doing that lately. They've consolidated with New York Community Trust, but that interest in doctoral education remains. And so we wrote a proposal to focus the funding around dissertations around the Grand Challenges for Social Work. In the past, it had been very much a clinical practice focused RFP from Fosbeck. So this is broader. We're looking for good ideas for dissertation proposals from PhD and DSW students across the spectrum, not just in the clinical realm, but related to services, related to policy, anything that would advance the New York Community Trust's mission of strengthening the social work teaching and research and practice pipeline, and helping to reach disadvantaged populations which are in need of social work services. So that also, of course, fits very well with the Grand Challenges. Hopefully you've had a chance to, or will have a chance to, look at the guiding principles of the Grand Challenges and get a little more familiarity with our mission. But it is generally to bring science to improving society, and through social work and our allies. So that's a bit of background. And this first year is both a pilot year and a real year. So we are working out some of the details of just what we're asking people. We're trying to be as straightforward and uncomplicated as possible. So we started out with some of the guidelines from past announcements and got rid of things like making you pass your dissertation proposal or other kinds of milestones, just because we know that timing is not always under your control. So basically, in order to apply for this, you just have to get a clear statement from your dissertation or capstone professor, dissertation chair or capstone professor, that you're going to be able to complete your dissertation, that you're on track. So that's all you have to do, and submit an application, and you'll be considered for excuse me, considered for an award. The review process is one that will involve the networks from 13 Grand Challenges. You can identify up to 2 networks that you would like to be reviewed by, but you don't have to put two, you can put one. That review will take place. And then from those network reviews, there'll be an overall review and then final approval by the leadership board of the Grand Challenges, which has a wide array of scholars and organizational leaders and practitioners in social work. And then we should have announcements out to you early in 2023. So I could give you lots more detail, but most of what I could tell you is already in the announcement itself. And so I think what I would ask Kira to do is maybe not share the screen anymore so we can have a little bigger picture of all of us. And then thank you. And then open it up for questions in the chat, or if you want to just shout out. If we get so many people shouting out that you're feeling neglected, you could certainly raise your hand. I know doctoral students know how to get questions asked, so I won't worry about that part of it. Okay, I see the chat has got some greetings from folks who know each other. It's one of the great things about social work is that it's a small world and people really do get to know each other, and our mentors knew other mentors of our peer groups, and this will continue to be the case. And hopefully we'll create a generational tidal wave of Grand Challenges activity and powerful scholarship.
While folks are thinking about their questions, if no one's ready to jump quite in, I thought we could share some of the frequent flyers on our last call, which a few things come to mind. One is that every grant, every award will be $3,000. That's a specified amount across the board. There's no differentiation based on how good your application is. And the other question that came up was around how competitive this will be, whether certain Grand Challenges will be more competitive than others. This is our first go round of this, so we have no idea what to expect in terms of how many applications we're going to receive. We've gotten a lot of interest, certainly since the announcement went out. Lots of folks are asking questions and have joined these calls, so we are expecting a good turnout. But we don't have a way of fully knowing kind of how many folks are going to submit for each of the Grand Challenges. So, I think being able to think about your work creatively in a way that you can see kind of it working with multiple Grand Challenges, and really, thinking about maybe which of the Grand Challenges you could expect are raise the most interest or most engaged. Eliminate Racism was one of the most recent additions, and so we know there's a lot of interest there, but maybe you're working on eliminating racism within X system, and that's an opportunity to think about a different Grand Challenge that you might be connected to.
So a couple of other things about that. People ask about the budget. We decided not to ask for a detailed budget. Basically, you'll just get a check from the University of Maryland Baltimore Foundation, which is the administrative arm of this grant, for $3,000. And you can spend it the way that you want, as long as you do it lawfully. You can get the grant from any state. This is a national competition. New York Community Trust understands that. They had some other grant categories that were just about New York City, but this grant category was not. So although we do ask you for some information about your budget, if you're going to use it for subject fees, great. But we had a long discussion. We do have an advisory group of chairs from the doctoral programs and DSW programs and others, and a student who has been getting an award that we've been giving in Maryland, Nancy Frank, who helped us think through all this. And so we tried to simplify things. And that's one way we did that. And we agreed that if someone needed this to pay for childcare so they could get out to do a focus group, that's at least as important as paying subject fees so that people could come to the focus group from the other end of the work, which is the work, of course, of respondents. So we're trying to support both you as professionals and have you support respondents in ways that are respectful of the time that they provide. So a question about not presenting their capstone until 2024. Can they still apply? We do not prohibit that, but I would think that you would probably be more competitive in the next year. But again, that's why we tried not to limit this too much. If it's going to be September 2024, then you probably don't want to wait until the next cycle, which might not complete until January of 2024. So maybe you want to know whether you're going to have that money in hand in order to plan your dissertation. So yes, you can apply, but we don't have all of our rubrics figured out about how we're going to make decisions. Should all of you write perfect proposals, we'd have to obviously come up with some tiebreakers. And one of them might be how soon you need the money. But all that's another committee that is working on the procedures related to exactly how we're going to deal with tiebreakers and other matters like that.
I'll jump in with a quick question about the budget narrative, if that's okay.
Yeah.
So I noticed in the award guidelines that it does specifically say funds are not allowed for political activities, lobbying. Is there anything else we should be aware of that is off limits for use of funds?
I don't know that there is. I've been involved with the UMB Foundation for a long time. It's very flexible. Certainly, if you decided you wanted to pay somebody more than $600 to do some kind of task for your project, you would need to also figure out what you need to do with the IRS. All of you will be filling out W-9s when you do this. So really anything that's consistent with the rules of the IRS should be fine. But you can travel. We didn't rule that out. It should be travel, of course, that's related to your proposal. But we are not going to be looking at every detail of your itinerary or anything like that.
Yeah, I'll just add to that. We tried to set it up in a way where we can just pass the funds to you without having to kind of monitor that. So the foundation was helpful in thinking about like what to call it in order to do that. So that the only considerations you all as awardees would have to think about is certainly like legal boundaries and how it might impact taxes. So one of the folks that's on our review committee advisory group works really closely with taxes and was able to kind of like chime in on things that would be tax deductible and things that weren't. So, I think if you're awarded, then we can talk more about like what would be a best use of those funds and how to kind of work around it.
Okay, we're getting some great questions, and some of them may be going so fast they'll skip over some, but so please, if we miss any, get back to us. Is clinical work not likely to be funded? Clinical work could be funded as long as it's within a knowledge building framework. So there does need to be research of to some extent. We have talked about whether we want to call it research, or whether we want to call it science or evidence creation. We use certainly different kinds of language in the announcement, but there would have to be some knowledge generation. It could not just be an intervention that you were going to, let's say you wanted to use it for community organizing, but you weren't collecting any real consistent, systematic information about it that could yield a product that could then be presented with some substantial evidence. Now, there's lots of ways of creating evidence. You could have a rigorous process that you go through, a qualitative process that as you're going through your community-based intervention, for example, or your clinical intervention, some kind of rigorous strategy that you're using with some. So my background would be like single subject research, where you're varying what you do at times to see what the impact is. So that could certainly work. but for the most part, it does need to be, as it needs to be, I assume, for your degrees, it does need to have a scholarly component to it. Let's see, is funding for dissemination, conference, professional organization presentations prohibited? No, that's fine. No, that's great. In fact, that's an expectation that the New York Community Trust has, and one that's not really particularly funded. We hope that you will be able to make presentations, and if you can save some of the money that you don't need for your to do the research to pay for presentations, that's absolutely part of the deal, and that would be very good. I will also say, we don't say a lot about this, but you will, with the approval of your, I'm going to call them chairs, because I'm not sure exactly what that faculty member is called in DSW programs. I think it varies, but with the approval of your chair, you will also get connected to the grant challenge that you've applied for and been accepted for a mentoring program. So each grant challenge, the network leads and their allies have committed to providing mentoring to the awardees. And so hopefully they will also give you some opportunities through the network to do some presenting and dissemination. Let's see.
There was one question in the chat about where to find more information around, kind of like more details around each of the grand challenges, and Ari dropped our website into the chat. That is a great place to start. It's got kind of the original papers. It has a lot of the background information. Each of the grand challenges has its own page where you can see who the network leads are. You can see the original papers related to that grand challenge. You can see different activities that have been going on. So if you're not familiar with our website, that is a great place, as well as our social media for sure. One question that came in, Rick, beyond compatibility or alignment with a grand challenge and addressing the criteria in the guidelines, what are some of your recommendations for a successful application? What will the review committees be looking for?
Okay. Well, let me just go off what you just said a little bit, Kira, and work my way towards the answer to that question. Another resource is another resource are the 2 Grand Challenge books. And if you look at those books, you'll see that there's a shift between the first book and second book within some Grand Challenges, different authors, different focus. Some of them are quite consistent. They clearly build on each other. Others, like Stop Family Violence, became Building Healthy Relationships. One of the topics on the social isolation chapter changed. Some of the chapters changed quite a bit. So I would become familiar with who's more recently involved with the grand challenges as network leads. So the second book, all proceeds go to the grand challenges. So I'm not afraid to argue for your getting a hold of one of those books. But in any event, I would look at that. And so the network leads are going to, one of the things that we've always said about the grand challenges is that the networks drive the grand challenges, and we let 1,000 flowers bloom. So we have a centralized office of a very tiny degree, and mostly everything comes out of the network. So if you look at the scholarship of the network leads, I can't say that they're going to necessarily be the reviewers, but just like you're writing a grant for any other purpose, if you're writing a grant to the NIH, you'd want to look at the study section and what those folks seem to be interested in. And so you should do some of the same looking at the network. Some of the networks have done special issues of journals. Some of them have quite elaborate membership rosters. Some of them have very small membership rosters. So again, those will vary, but that would give you some clues. So if you, just to give you an example, one of the most stable networks has been Ending Homelessness, that Deborah Paget and Ben Penwood have done. And they've been very clear about families first, housing first, sorry. And if you wrote something that was like, this is the major alternative to housing first that we really need to explore, they might be curious about that, or they might say, well, gee, that just doesn't align with what this Grand Challenge has been doing. So it would be a risk, let's put it that way. We're going to try to, this whole notion of bringing PhD programs and DSW programs together, as many of you know, is pretty new. DSW programs have just come into GADE in the last year or two. The conversations, so I was a doctoral program chair before there were DSW programs, so I don't really even know the language used. I'm learning about capstones and other things, but so we're gonna try to reflect both a DSW perspective and what the capstones offer, as well as a PhD perspective. And I guess there's some programs that you can do either one in the reviews, but the history of the Grand Challenges definitely comes out of the PhD side. So it started out in many ways because it came out of the American Academy of Social Work and Social Welfare, which was very research based. And those were the early years of the Academy. There were only maybe 30 or 40 of us in the Academy, and maybe 12 of us were on the steering committee of the Grand Challenges. There's still a pretty heavy interest in science driven scholarship. So whatever that means to you, and again, it can mean a lot of different things. I would just be aware of that. That's a cultural fact, I guess, about the Grand Challenges. Let's see. Any time-bound restrictions to completion of the projects? Yes, we do. Of course, we're not going to take the money back if you don't do it. But what we want to be able to do is go back to the New York Community Trust and say, these are the folks that we funded. This is what they got done. Please give us another 5 years. And we'd like to get a little more money for 5 years and keep this going. So that's our goal. And so the later that things get done, the less likely it is that we wouldn't have a gap between our current plan of funding and some future funding. So we're eager to have people move along. But again, we're not going to, if you give us a somewhat totally unrealistic plan, that wouldn't fly. But if you gave us a very ambitious plan, we're not going to, know the difference and hold that against you. So, but that's the pressure that we're under, is to do well by you, but also do well by this initiative and the New York Community Trust.
And the other thing I'll add to that, what came out in the original guidelines said June 30th, 2024. And we heard from some folks who are in differently timed programs. And so we're going to at least extend that concept until through the end of that summer for folks who end in August or, things like that. So there's some flexibility around that. But as Rick said, we do want you to be along with the process and moving forward.
I'm sorry, I came in a little late. That June 2024, is that the anticipated date for folks that are graduating, assuming that the dissertation would have been completed?
Yes.
And
Okay,
so,
got it.
again, we want to just not be too hung up by deadlines. December 9th is a hard deadline for getting it in. But if people needed the summer to complete, then they should put that in their plans and be realistic, and that's fine. Let's see.
So Jade's question, how many awards will be given? There will be one award given for each of the 13 grand challenges this year and another 13 next year. That's what we have funds for as we speak. But as Rick said, we hope to, be able to continue offering it, but that's where we are for now.
And we're hoping that if this works, that we might get others who support the awards like this. So that's part of our excitement about it. So with regard to the DSW papers, there are lots of different versions of the DSW programs. Someone wrote, Alicia, I guess that's how you pronounce it, I hope so. Normally a 30-page paper with plenty of references. Also, we have to submit the proposal to an academic scholarly publication. So you have to submit the proposal or the capstone paper that's finished, because that would be a plus in any event, because we are looking for evidence that you can take what you're doing and get it out into the world. The New York Community Trust and all of us want to make sure that we're trying to sponsor scholarship that will make a difference. And so it's good that if you are thinking about publishing it. I don't know, I've read some what I think were DSW capstones, because the authors were gracious enough to thank their committees in the acknowledgements. And so it was pretty clear when, you know, who they were. They tried to blind the paper, but then they left that in the acknowledgements that were literature reviews only, not really to the level of systematic reviews. It's possible that one of those would be funded, but I think a 30-page literature review that didn't have any new data collection or any other rigor that with regard to like a really rigorous systematic review wouldn't do that well in the competition. But again, we don't know. Maybe it would be the only one in one of the, every grand challenge has not raised the same level of interest and doesn't have the same level of underlying research. There's a lot more research in building healthy, you know, in creating healthy, promoting healthy development than there is in social isolation, for example. So depending on what your skill and interest level is and what the topic bears or what the traditions are in that grand challenge, it may or may not, you may or may not be successful with your application.
Rick, one question that just came in, I was typing response, but it's probably easier to discuss. Will there be a possible waiting list for applicants that were not selected for next year? I'll start by saying we certainly are going to keep a record of everyone that applied. We'll have, you know, that all of that information. We can't give feedback to all of the applicants necessarily to encourage you to resubmit. But I think actively now we could say certainly resubmit for next year if you aren't selected. Rick, I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that.
No, I don't think so. I think you'd have to resubmit. Certainly if something tragic happened and somebody couldn't, or even semi-tragic, and couldn't do their dissertation and they turned their funds back in, we would go to the next person. But that's not real likely. We would be most likely to just try to give them as much time and accommodate their needs so they could keep going. But that's certainly a possibility. That's about the only thing that I can think of. Otherwise, you would need to reapply because you'd have new ideas, you'd have a new timeline. There would be differences in what you were doing. You know, it's really weird to do this and not provide feedback, because as doctoral program chairs and faculty, we love the opportunity to try to get people to model their scholarship after our scholarship. It's like this little bit of self-flattering that we do. So not being able to give feedback is just going to be torturous. On the other hand, we may have 80 applicants, and it's going to be hard enough just to review the ones that, and we'll probably have to do some cuts, and to try to give feedback on all of them would just be too much, too punishing for those who agreed to participate, because they have their own responsibilities to their students, like all of you. So just like the NIH, they cut some off and they don't give feedback to them. We may decide that we'll give feedback to a group that we think could be most likely to succeed if they reapplied. But at this point, we haven't agreed to give any feedback. You're just going to get a notice about whether you were funded or not. I know it's weird, but that's all we can do. Yes, you can fund internationally. That's that's fine. We can certainly learn a lot from interventions we do anywhere. But that we can bring back to the US or just use to benefit people wherever they are delivered. That's fine.
And to build on that, there was an earlier question around international students. That's fine as well. The only restrictions are around that you are enrolled in a university or program based in the United States or its territories. So, that's the only kind of barriers there.
Mhm. Okay, yeah, I think we'll make the recordings available because everybody had to click a little dot it to agree to be recorded, right? So I think that's fine. Anything else? Hmm. So just to clarify, there is a face sheet that you all will fill out. And then, Kira, they're gonna upload their paper onto that?
Yeah, so if you look at the form, it's a whole bunch of, short answer kind of contact information. And then there's two places for you to upload. One will be your CV or your resume, and the other will be every other piece of the application. So, items 1 through 6 or 7, I'm not looking at it right now. You would combine into one PDF and then submit it that way.
And again, this is a first run through. So if you have, after this call or at any point you have issues, we'll be, we'll be updating our frequently answered questions and making sure that anybody who checks that could get the most recent information. I don't think we have a way to, Kira, confirm or not, the way to necessarily send an email message out to everybody when we update the FAQ. You'd have to check on it.
I mean, we could send a notice out. We have all the registration information. So once it's complete, I'm happy to send out a little alert to everyone who registered for both webinar sessions to let you all know.
Great.
And yeah, there's a question around whether you have to identify a grand challenge. And thank you for folks chiming in for each other. That's lovely. So you are required to select at least one grand challenge that your work most directly connects with. And then you have the option of a second one, but you don't have to identify a second one.
And then this other question is really good about the statement indicating agreement to each of the listed items. So again, this is a bit of the legacy from the FOSBEC, where we asked the chair of the doctoral programs if to sign off that they would agree to manage this program and do everything that they were told. And then we got feedback from some folks that they had like 6 doctoral students who were applying. And so they were writing 6 letters, and that was a lot of their time. So we decided to cut out the chairs of the doctoral programs, so they're not having to certify that you all are going to spend this money wisely. All we're asking for is the one indication that your chair believes that you're going to succeed in this dissertation. So, so don't bother your program chairs. You can certainly let them know you're applying, but you don't need anything from them, and you don't really have to. For item 5, the letter is basically a brief statement indicating agreement to each of the listed items. Yeah, I think it's basically just that. I don't think you have to. That's sort of our remaining safeguard list. I don't know whether we'd even keep that for another year, but we'll see how outrageous the conduct is of the awardees, and then we might keep it if we really need it, but probably that would also become part of the history. Okay, I think we pretty much got it. I know how busy everyone is. Kira and I are happy to stay on for a little while longer if anybody wants to linger and ask us a question that they didn't want to ask in the larger group. But unless I see anything else, then we'll call it a day, and we look forward to your successes, and we hope that this is a good experience for you, and that we get some winners out of this group this year or next.
And please feel free to reach out with questions as you're working on them. There's the Grand Challenges email address is listed on the materials, and we encourage you to submit questions there too. Those will get added to FAQs as they come in as well. So we just wanted to provide an opportunity for, I was going to say face-to-face, not quite, but face-to-face with some of you to be able to, verbally ask some questions. So this is not your last chance to ask questions.
And thanks to you who wrote nice notes to us. They're appreciated.
Jenny, the question on IRB, I don't know if you're still on. Yes, you are. There you are. No, we just, if your project requires IRB approval of any variety, then we would want to see evidence that you've at least started the process, submitted. You don't have to have that final approval yet, but we wanted to include some sort of language for those projects that don't involve IRB. So, if that doesn't relate to your project, no worries. But if it does, then some sort of evidence that you've started the submission process.
Yeah, again, we don't want to hang you up by having you waiting and being dependent on somebody else, and therefore not being able to move forward with your application. Because we know we've all made people wait. What a nice note. Yes, praying that all you finish your program strong, indeed.
What a supportive bunch. This is great. We're answering each other's questions in the chat. I loved it. Love it.
It's a great profession.